My dear learners, I would like to welcome you all to this online course on Development Economics 2. In this course, we are going to learn the following topics. These are demography and development, then rural markets, land labor credit markets, environment and sustainable development, next issues regarding globalization. While discussing the part on demography and development, this picture captures a very well-known position on the debate on demography and development. This can be termed as pessimistic view about population growth, and a major section of people are actually subscribed. They are the subscribers of this view of pessimistic view about population growth. It says that population growth will ultimately lead towards chaos, famines, crisis, etc. But there is yet another position that is held by Professor Amartya Sen and others. They are actually criticizing this position, and they are saying this apocalyptic view about population growth is empirically baseless, right? So let us start. Now what we learn in this section? Basic definitions on demography, demographic transition. Next we talk about gender bias. Next, we discuss income, mortality, fertility choices, and human capital, and its interconnections. And then we end up this section with a discussion on migration. Now, what we learn in this lecture? In this lecture, we learn a quick summary about the idea of development. Then, we talk about features of underdevelopment and developing countries. Then we discuss the issues regarding HDI or Human Development Index and performances of developing countries. Then we discuss world's population history. And next we talk about key concepts, basic key concepts and definitions on demography. We end this lecture with a discussion on COVID-19 and its impact on population, and we finish this lecture with a brief discussion on the issues regarding India's population trajectory. Next, idea of development. Development can be seen as a process of expanding the real freedoms that people enjoy. This is the definition provided by economist Amartya Sen. According to this definition, we can see that development is a multidimensional issue. Also, in other way, development can be defined as the process of improving the quality of all human lives and capabilities by raising people's levels of living, self-esteem, and freedom. These are the two very popular definitions on development. Now, let us talk about developing countries and try to understand the issue of underdevelopment or features of underdevelopment. Development countries are basically countries of Asia, Africa, and Latin America. And what are the features of underdevelopment? Let us understand one by one the features of underdevelopment. So, number one, lower standard of living and lower productivity, lower level of human capital, high population growth rate, then adverse geography, higher level of inequality, and presence of absolute poverty. Next important topic is lingering colonial impacts and poorer institutions, absence of financial markets and other markets, etc. Now, the implication of high population growth, one crucial implication of high population growth is the following. That is, the current active labor force must actually take care of a high proportion of dependent population. So that's a crucial issue regarding high population growth. Next, let us take the first question of this lecture, which is a very basic question. That is, what are the two most populous countries in the world? Let me start with the answer to this question, that what are the two most populous countries in the world? So the answer is very obvious and I hope all of you know it, but let me reiterate. The answer is China and India. These are the two most populous countries in the world. India's population is around 2018, it is around 1.35 billion, which made India contributing around 17%, over 17% of world's population. And what about China? China's population is 1.42 billion, which makes China as a contributor of more than 18% of world population. It implies that putting together these two countries' population, we can get more than 36% of world's population. So these two countries, only these two countries are contributing more than 35 to 36% of world's population. Now, the absolute figure, the usual notion is that, usual convention is that the absolute figures about population will not tell us much. So we have to consider the issue of population density. What is the definition of population density? Population density means number of people living per square kilometer, right? So this average, so the global average of population density is around 61 people per square kilometer. But if we take all the large countries, Bangladesh is coming out as the most population-wise dense country in all over the world. Bangladesh's population density is more than 1,000 people per square kilometer, which is more than 3 times of India's population density. So you can imagine from this comparative picture how dense some of the countries are, like Bangladesh. Let us proceed. Now, as we have said that we have to discuss about the issue of HDI, Human Development Index, and performances of developing countries. The historical measure of Human Development Index, the Historical Index of Human Development, HIHD, is a summary measure of average achievement in 3 key dimensions of human development: a long and healthy life, being knowledgeable, and having a decent standard of living. So in these 3 aspects, we can see over time, performance of South Korea is way better than many other countries. South Korea's performance over time is even better than performance of United States of America, USA, or countries like UK or United Kingdom. Next, we have to talk about countries like Brazil and China. They have also done quite well over time regarding HDI. Now, we have to focus next on India. If we focus on India, we can see that India's performance is not up to the mark if we compare it with South Korea. Even if we compare India with Brazil and China, then also we can see a huge gap. So, India must go a long way to achieve good developmental outcomes. As we discuss population and as we discuss population's history, can you point out 1 or 2 important time points in world's history of population growth? Right, so we are continuing with the answer of the second question. The second question was, just mark a few time periods in the world's history of population growth. And so let me give the answer first and then discuss the world's history of population growth. So as we can see that 2 points that can be marked in this world history of population growth, these 2 points are Industrial Revolution, that time point around 1750, and then the time period around 1950, and consequently 1950 to 1990, that can be marked as a period of rapid population growth. Now, if we go back to the history of population growth, we can observe that 2000 years ago, world population was around 250 million. And around 1750, around Industrial Revolution, it stands around 728 million. And in 1950, it became 2576 million. And in 1990, it became 5.3 billion. So now we can understand how rapid population growth was in the period of 1950 to 1990. Now, let us discuss one crucial definition regarding this, the definition of doubling time. It refers to the period that a given population takes to increase by its present size. So, doubling time refers to the period that a given population takes to increase by its present size. So, before 1650, this doubling time was around 36,000 years, and now it has come down to only 58 years. So, that actually entails how rapid population growth happened, especially after the event of Industrial Revolution, right? After discussing the history of population growth, it is important to point out the present scenario regarding population and future prospects. So, for that, we are using the latest report published by UN in this year 2022. The report name is World Population Prospects 2022. According to this report, in this coming November 2022, world will reach at 8 billion mark regarding the total population. And as per this report's projection, world population will reach at a peak of 10.4 billion people around 2080s. So, now we can mention the reason. One crucial reason for this rapid population growth is that declining mortality rate that can be reflected by raising or increasing life expectancy all over the world. The life expectancy has already reached around 72 years, and it is projected to reach up to 77 years around 2050. Also, we have to remember one crucial trend of world population, that is the fertility rate all over the world has declined clearly. So, there is a clear declining trend regarding fertility rate. Next, we must note that the 2/3 portion of population growth, whatever is happening now, can be explained by past growth. So, what is the implication of this point? The implication is that whatever government policies we undertake now will result only after some time, and that cutoff time period is after 2050. So, that should not mean that we should not take good government policies, but we have to keep in mind that whatever government policies we take now will provide result after 2050 or something of that sort. Next, what are the important questions about population growth? Is rapid population growth a serious problem, or the rapid population growth is the manifestation of other serious problems in developing countries? How can population growth affect development, and how development in turn can affect population growth? Another crucial question is that how can the developing countries, how can they provide decent healthcare and educational facilities to its ever increasing population in this scenario? Will developing countries be able to extend other facilities in this scenario? Next question is there a relationship between poverty and family size? Next, we discuss very important definitions and concepts regarding demography. So, first concept is regarding natural increase. Natural increase is nothing but the difference between the existing birth rate and death rate. The basic difference between existing birth rate and death rate can be defined as natural increase. The next definition is about net international migration. Net international migration can be understood by following the in-migration, the difference between in-migration happening in a country and if we measure the difference between in-migration and out-migration, in-migration happening into a country and out-migration happening from that country, that difference will tell us net international migration. Next point is crude birth rate. Crude birth rate is nothing but the number of children born alive each year per 1,000 population. And death rate is nothing but the number of deaths each year per 1,000 population. So let me repeat once again these two last definitions. The birth rate is nothing but number of children born alive each year per 1,000 population, and death rate is the number of deaths each year per 1,000 population. Now let me go to another very, very important definition, which is the definition about total fertility rate. Total fertility rate can be defined as the number of children that would be born to a woman if she were to live to the end of her childbearing years and bear children in accordance with the prevailing age-specific fertility rates. So this is basically, total fertility rate is basically the average number of children a woman would have if she were to bear children and stay alive throughout her childbearing years, which is age 15 to age 49. Now let us point out here that this fertility rate is very high in sub-Saharan Africa and in Western Asia. So in some parts of the world, especially sub-Saharan Africa and in Western Asia, this fertility rate is still very high. Moving on, in this figure, we are portraying fertility rates over time for many different countries. So here we should note that there is a clear trend of declining fertility rate for all these countries and in all these continents. There is no doubt about it. But if we go deeper, we can observe that Africa has not done very well regarding fertility rate. Its fertility rate has declined, but not drastically. But now if we see performance of China or performance of India, we must note that China's performance is really exceptional, as it has, according to this figure, the lowest fertility rate, and India's performance is also very significant in reducing its fertility rate. Many scholars have pointed out towards China's one-child policy, which was a coercive measure and which was a very successful policy in China in declining fertility rate. But in this connection, we must note that India, without such a coercive policy, also has done significantly well regarding reducing its fertility rate. Moving on, the next question, let us take another question. How do TFR varies in India and China? We have seen the general declining trend. Now going deeper, we would like to know that the question is trying to ask that how do, in a deeper way, TFR varies between India and China. So now let me answer the question. As we have discussed, as we have asked the question that the difference between TFR between India and China, we can observe that China's TFR is way low than many other countries. It is even lower than the 2 cutoff, that is called replacement level. And India's TFR is just above the 2. So China has discontinued its one-child policy, and it has increased this limit to up to 2 children, and then eventually they increased the limit further to up to 3 children in China in order to correct the situation, in order to improve the situation on labor force participation, which they are projecting, they are actually projecting that they may come across a shortage in labor force in the future. Next, if we see the TFR of India, we can see a clear decline, and which has come closer to 2 in the recent past. And now another important issue regarding this fertility, which is the sex ratio at birth, which is number of males per 1,000 female. Now this ratio is worsening in these two countries, in China as well as in India. In this figure we can observe that over time since 1970, and if we compare the today's data, we can see that the ratio, sex ratio at birth is worsening in India and in China, and it is even worse in comparison to India, and it is even worse in China. And many scholars have pointed out towards the one-child policy, the coercive nature of one-child policy amidst excessive son preference in developing countries and including in China, that may result in such an issue. Next, moving on, COVID-19, impact of COVID-19. COVID-19 has impacted in 3 ways: life expectancy, international migration, and in fertility. The impact on fertility is quite mixed. Impact on migration is very serious as mobility was restricted, and impact regarding global life expectancy at birth fell to 71 years in 2021, down from 72.8 in 2019. So this is a very crucial issue, and in many parts such as Latin America, Caribbean, and Central and South Asia, life expectancy fell by even 3 years due to COVID-19. Now, towards end, let us point out very briefly India's recent demographic issues. So there are 3 points: inter-country issues, interstate issues, and intergenerational issues. So what are the inter-country issues? That in comparison to many other countries, India is right now having a potential for demographic dividend, as India's proportion of youth in the entire population is quite high. So India may potentially reap a demographic dividend. Next, what about interstate issue? Interstate, the current findings are showing that southern states have done much well in comparison to central and northern states like Bihar or Madhya Pradesh. So the next supply of labor force in future is going to come from central and northern states in India, and southern states may face some kind of labor shortage scenario. And what about the next point, intergenerational issues? Regarding intergenerational issue, we must note that India, although India is enjoying a potential for demographic dividend as it has a higher percentage of youth population, still we must note that India's proportion of elderly people is also increasing, right? And it will increase eventually more in the near future. So in this regard, India must adapt itself to take care of this elderly population. Next, so let us end with learning outcomes. What are the things you can learn from this lecture? So number 1, this lecture is an introduction to the debate on high population growth and development, basic definitions regarding demography, some important diagrammatic representations on fertility, sex ratio at birth, etc. Also performances of developing countries we have studied in relation to HDI, and also we have mentioned the issues of COVID-19. How can COVID-19 actually have impacts or actually impacted the issues in developing countries, right? So these are the broad items, or these are the broad topics we are covering in this lecture, and we have raised many fundamental issues and questions which we will discuss in detail in the upcoming lectures, right? So our upcoming lectures will be on basic concepts and definitions. Next, we'll also talk about age structure and evolution of age structure over time in developing countries. Also, then we'll raise the issue in detail. We'll study the theory of demographic transition. Next, we'll talk about the issues regarding gender bias. Next, interconnections between income, fertility, mortality, etc., and its relationship with human capital we'll discuss. And we'll end this section with the lecture on migration. So, thank you very much.